My mom's 15-year affair with my uncle came to light when my dad had a heart attack at my promotion dinner. She had been using his second job money to fund their hotel stays. The night that shattered our family's foundation began like any other celebration in our home. The autumn evening had a crisp feel to it, and the warm lights from our dining room cast a gentle glow on the faces of those I loved most in the world. I had spent the afternoon preparing for what should have been a joyous family dinner, celebrating my promotion to senior manager at the firm where I'd worked for the past 8 years. The dining table was set with our best china, candles flickered in the centerpiece, and the aroma of my mother's signature lasagna filled the air. Everything seemed perfect, just as our family had always appeared to be. My sister Emma arrived first, her dark hair slightly windblown, carrying a bottle of my favorite wine. She had always been the more free-spirited of us two, wearing her heart on her sleeve and seeing the world through rose-tinted glasses. My husband Jake followed her into the kitchen, having just finished setting up the extra chairs we needed for the evening. The doorbell chimed at exactly 6:30 p.m., my parents, punctual as always. I remember thinking how handsome my father looked that evening, despite the slight pallor to his skin that I had attributed to the autumn chill. At 58, he still carried himself with the same dignity and warmth that had characterized him throughout my childhood. He wore the blue sweater I had given him last Christmas, and his eyes crinkled at the corners when he hugged me, whispering how proud he was of my achievement. My mother stood beside him, elegant in her cream blouse and pearl necklace, a gift from Dad on their 30th anniversary. The perfect couple, or so I thought. The initial part of the evening flowed smoothly. We shared stories over appetizers, laughing at Jake's terrible jokes and discussing Emma's latest adventure in starting her own photography business. Dad seemed particularly engaged, asking questions about my new role and responsibilities, his eyes shining with genuine interest and pride. Looking back now, I should have noticed how quiet Mom was, how her laughter seemed forced, how her eyes kept darting to her phone every few minutes. The lasagna had just been served when everything fell apart. Dad was in the middle of telling us about his plans to finally retire next year when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. The fork in his hand clattered against the plate as his face contorted in pain. Time seemed to slow down as he clutched his chest, his complexion turning ashen. The scrape of his chair against the hardwood floor as he collapsed echoed through the room like a gunshot. The next few moments were chaos. Jake immediately called 911 while Emma and I rushed to Dad's side. I held his hand, feeling the erratic pulse beneath his clammy skin, watching helplessly as he struggled to breathe. But what stands out most vividly in my memory is my mother's reaction, or rather, her lack of one. While Emma and I were frantic with worry, Mom remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, her expression oddly vacant. It was as if she was watching a mildly interesting television show rather than witnessing her husband of 35 years fighting for his life. When the paramedics arrived, they moved with swift efficiency, asking questions about Dad's medical history. That's when the first crack appeared in our family's perfect facade. Mom's voice was steady, almost clinical, as she informed them of Dad's heart condition, a diagnosis from 6 months ago that she and Dad had kept from us. Emma and I exchanged shocked glances. How could we not have known? How had we missed the signs that our father was ill? The ride to the hospital was tense, filled with questions that Mom deflected with practiced ease. "We didn't want to worry you girls," she said, her voice carrying a hint of irritation at our persistent questioning. "Your father thought it would be best to handle it ourselves." Something in her tone, a slight edge I had never noticed before, made my stomach churn. The hospital waiting room became the stage for our family's unraveling. Emma, always the more emotional one, broke down in tears, blaming herself for not noticing Dad's condition. That's when Mom's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. Perhaps it was the stress of the situation, or maybe she simply couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. Her revelation came not with tears or remorse, but with a cold pragmatism that chilled me to the bone. The truth emerged in fragments, each piece more devastating than the last. Dad's heart condition hadn't developed in a vacuum, it was the physical manifestation of 2 years of emotional trauma, triggered by the discovery of Mom's affair with his best friend Mark. Not just any affair, but a 5-year relationship that had been conducted while Dad worked endless hours to provide for our family. The betrayal cut deeper when we learned that Mark wasn't just Dad's best friend, but also our uncle by marriage, our aunt's husband. The clinical way Mom described her infidelity made it even worse. There was no remorse in her voice when she explained how she had chosen to stay with Dad for financial security while continuing her relationship with Mark. She spoke of her duplicity as if discussing a business arrangement, explaining how Dad's stable income and social standing made him the more practical choice, while Mark provided the excitement she craved. When we were finally allowed to see Dad in his hospital room, the sight of him hooked up to various machines broke something inside me. His usual strength was replaced by vulnerability, and the pain in his eyes when he saw us was unbearable. Through tears, he apologized repeatedly for keeping the truth from us, explaining how he had been trying to protect us while simultaneously attempting to save his marriage through counseling. The revelation created a rift between Emma and me that I never saw coming. My sister, always seeking to understand all sides of a situation, suggested that perhaps Mom's actions came from a place of emotional need rather than malice. Her words felt like a betrayal, sparking a heated argument in the hospital corridor that required Jake's intervention to diffuse. The look of disappointment in Dad's eyes when he heard us arguing only added to the weight of the evening's revelations. As I sat beside Dad's hospital bed that night, holding his hand while he slept, I couldn't help but reflect on all the memories of my childhood, the family vacations, the Sunday dinners, the proud smiles at graduation ceremonies. How many of those moments had been tainted by Mom's deception? How many times had she rushed through family events to meet Mark? How many of Dad's extra shifts had unknowingly funded their rendezvous? That night marked the end of our family as we knew it, but it also became the beginning of something else, a journey toward truth, healing, and redemption. None of us would ever be the same, but perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Sometimes it takes the complete destruction of an illusion to see the reality that was there all along, and to build something more authentic from the ashes of what was lost. Update 1. The 2 weeks following Dad's heart attack tested our family in ways I never thought possible. After 3 days in the hospital, Dad was cleared for discharge, but the thought of him returning to the house he had shared with Mom for over 3 decades was unbearable. Jake and I didn't even need to discuss it, we immediately offered him our home office as a temporary sanctuary. The room, with its wall of books and large window overlooking our small garden, seemed like the perfect space for Dad to heal both his heart and his spirit. Converting the office into a comfortable bedroom became our mission. Jake spent an entire weekend moving furniture and installing a new bed, while I obsessed over every detail, from the firmness of the mattress to the arrangement of the bedside table. Emma helped too, bringing over Dad's favorite armchair from his study at home. The familiar leather chair, worn smooth from years of evening reading sessions, brought the first genuine smile we'd seen on Dad's face since that fateful dinner. But Mom's reaction to Dad's decision to stay with us unleashed a storm none of us were prepared for. The first time she showed up at our door unannounced, I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed woman who had maintained her composure even during Dad's collapse. Instead, she appeared disheveled, her mascara smeared from crying, her usually impeccable clothes wrinkled. She begged to speak with Dad, claiming she had ended things with Mark for good this time. "Please," she had sobbed, clutching at my sleeve when I blocked the doorway. "You don't understand. Your father and I can work through this. We've been together for 35 years, that has to mean something." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Those 35 years had meant everything to Dad, but apparently not enough to keep her faithful. Each time she appeared, Dad would retreat to his room, the sound of his door closing like a physical barrier between him and her increasingly dramatic displays. The situation reached a breaking point when Mom decided to ambush me at work. I was in the middle of a meeting with my team, discussing the implementation strategy for a new project, my first major initiative since the promotion, when my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Mom had swept past reception and was causing a scene in the lobby, demanding to see me. By the time I reached the lobby, a small crowd of my colleagues had gathered to witness my mother's meltdown. She stood in the center of the space, tears streaming down her face, pointing an accusatory finger at me as she shouted, "You've poisoned him against me." My own daughter, turning my husband against me after one mistake. One mistake. The words echoed in my head as security led her away. One mistake repeated countless times over 5 years, destroying not just her marriage but the foundation of our entire family. The pitying looks from my coworkers followed me back to my office, where I spent the next hour trying to compose myself before returning to the meeting. The promotion celebration I had so looked forward to sharing with my team was now overshadowed by my mother's spectacle. Emma's transformation during this period was both surprising and heartening. Her initial stance of trying to understand Mom's perspective crumbled as Mom's manipulation became increasingly apparent. The final straw came when Emma discovered Mom had been telling conflicting versions of events to different family members. To our Aunt Maria, she painted herself as the victim of an emotionally distant marriage. To our cousins, she claimed the affair was a recent, one-time indiscretion that Dad was blowing out of proportion. To our grandmother, she had even suggested that Dad's controlling nature had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. How could I have been so blind? Emma had broken down one evening, curled up on my couch after discovering yet another of Mom's lies. I actually defended her, tried to see her side of things. But there is no justification for this level of manipulation. The discovery of Mom's attempt to access Dad's retirement accounts marked a turning point in our family drama. Jake, who works in finance, had helped Dad review his accounts and discovered unusual activity. Mom had tried to transfer a significant sum, claiming she needed it for household expenses. Further investigation revealed a pattern of transfers to a separate account over the past few years, her escape fund, as we later learned, meant to finance a new life with Mark. The truth came out during a confrontation in our living room. Mom, cornered by the evidence, finally admitted that she and Mark had planned to leave their respective spouses and start fresh together. But Mark, faced with the possibility of losing his own family and reputation, had chosen to stay with his wife. The revelation of her abandoned escape plan seemed to break something in Mom. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, revealing the selfishness that had driven her actions all along. Throughout all of this, Dad remained quietly dignified, though I could see how each new revelation aged him. Some mornings, I would find him sitting in his leather chair before sunrise, staring out at the garden with red-rimmed eyes. But gradually, small signs of healing began to emerge. He started taking short walks around the neighborhood, joined a heart health support group at the local community center, and even began helping Jake with his weekend woodworking projects. What started as a temporary arrangement began to feel more permanent. Dad's presence in our home brought an unexpected peace, despite the chaos that continued to swirl around us. In the evenings, we would often sit together in the garden, talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than the carefully maintained illusions of the past. Update 2. They say the truth has a way of coming out, but no one prepares you for how it feels when decades of deception unravel before your eyes. The discovery came on a rainy Sunday afternoon as Jake and I helped Dad organize his papers for the upcoming divorce proceedings. We had converted our dining room table into a makeshift office, spreading out folders, bank statements, and old documents that told the story of my parents' shared life together. The atmosphere was somber but purposeful, until Dad opened an old laptop he'd retrieved from his home office. The device hadn't been used in years, but it still powered on, revealing a forgotten email account that Dad had used for his business correspondence with Mark. As he scrolled through the archived messages, his hands suddenly froze on the mousepad. The color drained from his face as he stared at the screen, and I immediately knew something was wrong. What we found in that email archive shattered even the revised version of our family history we've been struggling to accept. The emails between Mom and Mark dated back over 15 years, 3 times longer than she had admitted. The correspondence painted a picture of a calculated, long-term deception that made my stomach churn. There were intimate exchanges, secret meeting plans, and discussions about their future together. But what struck me most were the cold, pragmatic discussions about money and timing. Mom had repeatedly planned to leave Dad, but each time, she backed out when confronted with the financial realities of such a decision. "I can't believe I was so stupid," Dad whispered, his voice breaking as we read through the messages. "All those business trips Mark took, all those times your mother insisted I needed to work more hours to make up for his absence in the company." He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. We had discovered emails showing that Mom had actively encouraged Mark to take a job in another city 10 years ago. The move had forced Dad to work double shifts to compensate for the loss of Mark's partnership in their business, unknowingly financing the very affair that was destroying his marriage. The revelation about Mom's shopping trips and spa weekends hit particularly hard. Each receipt we found, each credit card statement, told the story of her elaborate deception. Those weekends she claimed to be visiting her sister. Hotel receipts showed she was meeting Mark, using Dad's hard-earned money to fund their rendezvous. The level of planning and manipulation was staggering. She had created a parallel life, funded by the man she was betraying, all while maintaining her image as the perfect wife and mother. Emma's arrival that afternoon marked another turning point. She had been struggling with her initial defense of Mom, and the weight of her guilt was visible in the dark circles under her eyes. As we showed her the evidence of Mom's decades-long deception, she sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. But it was the discovery of a particular email thread that finally shattered any remaining sympathy she held for our mother. Years ago, Dad had dreamed of starting his own business. He had the experience, the connections, and a solid business plan. Emma and I remembered how excited he had been, spending late nights at the kitchen table working on his proposals. But mysteriously, key investors had pulled out at the last minute, and the dream had died. The emails revealed the brutal truth. Mom had secretly contacted these investors, feeding them false information about Dad's business acumen and reliability. She had been afraid that his success would give him too much financial independence, threatening her ability to maintain control over the family's finances and her secret life with Mark. "She knew how much that business meant to me," Dad said quietly, after Emma's scream of rage had subsided. "I thought I had failed, that I wasn't good enough. For years, I worked twice as hard to make up for what I thought was my shortcoming." The defeat in his voice made my heart ache. This man, who had sacrificed everything for his family, had been systematically undermined by the person who was supposed to be his closest ally. The evidence kept mounting as we dug deeper. We found documentation of secret accounts, carefully hidden financial transactions, and a pattern of manipulation that spanned nearly half of their marriage. Each discovery was like a physical blow, forcing us to reevaluate every memory, every family moment, through this new lens of deception. Update 3. The divorce proceedings brought out a side of our mother that, despite everything we discovered, still managed to shock us. As her carefully constructed world crumbled around her, she launched a campaign of character assassination that would have made a tabloid journalist blush. When her initial demands for half of Dad's retirement funds were met with evidence of her years of financial deceit, she turned to social media as her weapon of choice. The post appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning, a lengthy exposition painting herself as the victim of decades of emotional abuse. She described Dad as controlling and manipulative, claiming that her affair with Mark had been her only escape from an oppressive marriage. The irony of her accusations might have been amusing if they hadn't been so devastating. Within hours, the post had been shared within our extended family circles, forcing us to confront yet another public scandal. But this time, the response wasn't what she expected. Years of her manipulation had left a trail of witnesses to her true nature. Cousins, aunts, and family friends came forward with their own stories, of her attempts to borrow money under false pretenses, of caught lies, of suspicious behaviors they'd noticed but never mentioned out of respect for Dad. Her own sister, Mark's wife, broke her silence with a scathing response that detailed how she had discovered the affair and the pain of realizing her sister's betrayal. Mom's attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly, isolating her further from the family she'd manipulated for so long. As the divorce proceedings continued, Dad began the slow process of rebuilding his life. The heart support group he'd joined became an unexpected source of comfort. There, he met Sarah, a widow who had lost her husband to heart disease 2 years prior. Their shared experiences created a foundation of understanding that blossomed into a gentle friendship. Watching Dad smile genuinely as he prepared for their weekly coffee meetings brought tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of hope. Emma's transformation was equally remarkable. The guilt she carried for initially defending Mom transformed into a fierce determination to protect Dad's interests. She threw herself into helping his lawyer compile evidence, her organizational skills proving invaluable in documenting Mom's years of financial manipulation. The process helped heal the rift between us, turning us from sisters who occasionally disagreed into steadfast allies in the protection of our remaining parent. The final straw in our relationship with Mom came when she tried to manipulate Emma's husband, Michael, into testifying against Dad in the divorce proceedings. She had cornered him after work, spinning tales about Dad's supposed financial misdeeds and attempting to prey on his professional background as an accountant. Michael's disgusted recounting of the conversation was all we needed to make the decision. It was time to cut all contact. The court's final ruling felt like vindication. Dad was awarded the family home, his retirement accounts remained intact, and Mom's claims to his business assets were dismissed. The judge's stern rebuke of her attempted financial manipulation served as public acknowledgement of what we had known all along. She had been the architect of her own downfall. Last we heard, Mom was living with her sister, the same sister whose marriage she had nearly destroyed. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. She still attempts to reach out occasionally, leaving tearful voicemails about the unfairness of it all, but our blocked numbers stand as digital boundaries against her manipulation. Dad's healing continues, both physically and emotionally. The house he was awarded in the settlement is now on the market, too big for one person and too full of memories. He's talking about buying a smaller place closer to Emma and me, perhaps with a garden where he can finally pursue his interest in growing vegetables. His coffee meetings with Sarah have become dinner dates, taken at a pace that feels comfortable for them both. As for Emma and me, we've learned that family isn't defined by perfect memories or unbroken facades. It's built on truth, resilience, and the willingness to stand together when everything falls apart. Our weekly family dinners continue, but now they're filled with genuine laughter and honest conversations. Sometimes, the destruction of one family leads to the creation of something stronger, a family bound not by obligation or appearance, but by choice and truth.